You know, the opening to this story needs to hold viewers for a full minute by grounding them in the simple truth that history's greatest survivors didn't rely on stocked kits, factory-made equipment, or perfectly planned supply chains. They relied on what was around them, what others overlooked, and what could be reshaped into something useful with a little effort and a lot of knowledge. For thousands of years, human survival hinged on scavenging, taking discarded, broken or naturally available materials and turning them into functional tools. It is an art form that stretches from Paleolithic hunters napping flakes off stone scraps to frontier scouts reworking metal from abandoned wagons, to wartime soldiers improvising equipment from the debris of battlefields. This skill set is rarely taught today, even though it remains just as valuable for modern survivalists, homesteaders, and anyone who wants to be more resilient. If your gear fails or disappears, scavenger survival becomes not just important, it becomes everything. And the people who mastered it throughout history did so because they understood one core principle. You can build tools from nothing if you understand what nothing really contains. The reason scavenger survival existed is because nothing in the past went to waste. One of the most powerful things about historical scavenging is that it was a way of life, not a backup plan. Hunters used leftover bone to shape needles and fishhooks because nothing else could be spared. Medieval peasants collected fallen iron nails from burned buildings and reforged them into awls, hinges, or blade edges. During trench warfare, soldiers transformed ration tins into stoves, lamps, and waterproof containers. In each case, the scavenged item was not seen as trash. It was seen as raw material. The mindset is what matters. Knowing how to look at an object and immediately identify what it can become is the first step toward mastering the lost art of making tools from nothing. For the modern viewer, this means shifting away from assuming that survival tools must come from a store. Knowledge replaces equipment. A broken piece of metal becomes a cutting edge. A bit of wire becomes a snare trigger. A shard of glass becomes a scraper. Scavenger survival isn't improvisation in the chaotic sense. It's precision repurposing, and people throughout history leaned on it because it worked. The foundation of scavenger survival comes from understanding materials, not tools. Survivors in every era learned which materials held value even in their most damaged form. Flint flakes, bone splinters, antler sheds, rusted metal scraps, broken ceramics, and even textile remnants all had distinct properties. Knowing those properties meant that anyone could produce a tool, even when existing equipment shattered or supplies dwindled. A chipped stone still cut. A snapped metal strap still pried and scraped. A cracked pot still carried embers or boiled water. This is where practical application becomes essential for a viewer today. Scavenger survival depends on assessment. When you pick up a discarded object, the question is not, "What was this originally?" but "What can this do right now?" A piece of tempered steel from an old file or tool can be resharpened against a stone and lashed onto a branch as a field knife. A length of fencing wire can be straightened, heated, and fashioned into hooks or tongs. A chunk of bone can be ground on a rock until it forms a functional awl for leatherwork or repairs. The historic record is full of examples where these transformations meant the difference between being prepared and being helpless. This art becomes powerful when combined with simple construction techniques anyone can learn. Scavenged materials become tools once they are shaped, sharpened, or lashed into form. This is where ancient and frontier methods provide direct inspiration. A basic flake of stone can be pressure flaked into a more controlled edge using antler or bone tips. A broken blade can be hafted onto a wooden handle using cordage made from plant fibres or old cloth strips. A metal can, flattened and folded, becomes a scoop or a container for heating liquids. These methods rely on controlled pressure, abrasion and binding, skills that can be learned with practice, not purchased. A practical example useful for today's viewers is building a simple cutting tool from scavenged materials. Start with any piece of metal with a workable edge, even if dull. Use a coarse stone to establish a bevel, grinding steadily until the edge forms. Then lash the metal onto a stick using tightly twisted cloth or wire. Historical scavengers use the exact same approach. It doesn't need to look polished, it needs to function. Another example is creating a container for carrying embers, which can be done using the body of a metal can lined with ash. Ancient and frontier communities relied heavily on ember transport because building fire from scratch was time-consuming and risky. Turning trash into a fire-preserving container allowed them to maintain continuity of heat through long travel or harsh weather. The real value of scavenger survival is that it frees you from dependence on perfect conditions. Modern survival culture often focuses on ideal gear, but history proves that conditions are rarely ideal. Tools break, supplies run out, plans fail. It was the ability to rebuild from whatever remained that allowed people to survive disasters, wars, migrations, and isolations. A person who masters scavenger survival can lose everything they carry and still rebuild their core equipment using found materials. That level of independence is rare today, but it is exactly what defines historical resilience. For viewers of Backyard Wisdom, this topic carries special relevance because it blends archaeology, frontier knowledge, and practical outdoor skills. It honours the creativity of past generations and hands that knowledge forward to anyone willing to learn it. You don't need a perfect workshop to begin. You need awareness, patience, and the willingness to treat discarded materials as potential survival assets rather than waste. The art of scavenger survival endures because it preserves human ingenuity at its purest. This skill is a reminder that people have been rebuilding their world from scraps for thousands of years. It is not a fallback, it is a primary strategy that empowered entire civilizations to persist through scarcity, destruction, and extreme environments. The knowledge is evergreen because the principle never changes. Materials remain valuable long after their original purpose ends. If you want more deep, practical breakdowns of historical survival skills that still work today, make sure to subscribe to Backyard Wisdom and share this video with others who appreciate how much power can come from understanding the old ways.